Okay, welcome to Studio 88. Today, my special guest, Muzammal Nawaz. Maz, as we all call him, is a kickboxing pioneer in our province. He's a head coach of many professional athletes here, and I brought him on today because he's full of knowledge. He's got the gift of gab, and welcome.
It's my pleasure, and if I would just want to start off by saying that I'm actually a great admirer of yours, Jamie. I mean, the work that you've done for the industry, both in kickboxing, but in MMA at the amateur level, at the professional level. I've met very few people that have dedicated so much time, despite failures, despite heartaches, despite challenges, that have kept going. And my hat goes off to you. Anyone that I've ever spoken to about the work that you've done has nothing but wonderful things to say. So it's an honor for me.
Thank you. It means a lot to come from you, to be honest. The first time I met you was through Dr. Faisal. And that was the very first charity show. So you were a part of that one. It was a different brand name at the time, but it was one charity, and we worked together on that. First time I met you, it was an instant hit. You were kind, soft-spoken, but also very blunt, and you knew what you were after, and I admired that. Faisal has a ton of love for you. I know a lot of the kickboxers in the region have a lot of love for you as well, because they make that travel to Burlington, and you're head of WAKO Canada. I kind of want to dive into that a little bit today because with the coronavirus and everything that's kind of happening, gyms are starting to reopen, but the government has implemented some plans, some processes, and you've been a big part of that, and you're just full of information. Give us a rundown just real quick of kind of how you began and kind of who you are, starting in the martial art community as a kid.
Sure.
I know some of the backstory, but I want you to tell you because
I guess there's a lot of backstories, but I always like giving credit to where we come from. And so my parents came to Canada. They're refugees from India. And we grew up in the Jane Finch Quarter, and there was very little for us to do. And unfortunately, at that time, there was a lot of racism, and we're even seeing today that some of that is becoming more and more evident in the world. So they put me into karate because my older sister used to have to protect me, and in our Pakistani culture, it's supposed to be the other way around, where the boy protects the girl and not the other way. So I started karate first, did martial arts for many years. I enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy the wearing the white pajamas all the time, but made my parents happy. I transitioned from martial arts into kickboxing and boxing in high school, mainly because my high school friends suggested that I challenge a local boxer at our high school for the very first UFC world title fight at the age of 15. And it lasted all of about 30 seconds. It might not even be 30 seconds, maybe. I'm giving myself credit. Maybe 10 seconds. And I was on the ground. My nose was bleeding. My eyes were watering. I went back to my karate instructor and said, "What happened? I'm a black belt. I should know what I'm doing." And he went on to tell me that in martial arts, we teach discipline, respect, honor. And in boxing, they teach something different. Now, coming from a very traditional Pakistani Muslim family, I was getting enough of the tradition and the respect to the honor. I just wanted to know how to fight. And I took my black belt, I put it in my closet, and never looked at it again for probably 5 or 6 years. Started boxing at the Bramley Boxing Club. Peter Soberman was my first coach. So I actually went into boxing first. Loved it. Was absolutely terrible. Those of you that are listening to this or watching this will know that transitioning from karate or martial arts into any real striking sport, whether it's kickboxing, boxing, MMA, they're two totally different worlds. So I got the school of hard knocks. But then from there, saw kickboxing on TV for the first time in the old PKA kickboxing TV shows, and totally fell in love with it, and then transitioned over to kickboxing and did that for years. Couldn't understand why we couldn't fight in Canada and Ontario when it was illegal. I happened to then transition from a career perspective. I was working for the Red Cross and got a position in Geneva with the International Red Cross, went to Europe, lived there for another number of years, and basically made my pro kickboxing debut and fought there for years before I came back here.
Wow. How'd you get involved with the PSO stuff, WAKO, and all? Like, how did you get into that?
Well, it's interesting because at the time, all we knew was kickboxing was illegal. I mean, or MMA, I think MMA wasn't even a word back then.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just had no idea.
What year was this?
1989.
That long.
That long ago.
I was 10 years old.
Sorry, we're not going to go into that conversation now.
Just kidding.
Yeah, I've got good hair. So that time, coming back and realizing that we have no idea why we can't fight or kickbox. And so I had worked for the Red Cross, and it was an NGO. So I had contacts in government, and we slowly started speaking to people in government, and even people in government didn't know why it was illegal. There was a very old legislation for Ontario, the Athletics Act, that it wasn't permitted. And so we just started working on it. I happen to have a knack for writing government policy because, quite boring. Wrote a lot of policy, and in 2003, we were able to get the very first PSO in the country established, and it became legal. And then step by step, year after year, province after province, we slowly started getting other provinces to get PSOs. Mm-hmm. We still have a ways to go, but I think the sport itself has evolved tremendously internationally now. WAKO, which is our international federation, the World Association of Kickboxing Organizations, was recognized by the International Olympic Committee a few years back. So was IFMA for Muay Thai. Mm-hmm. So now we're starting to see at the international level more credit due to sports that have been around for generations.
Now, was Canada behind the curve on that?
Absolutely.
Like, how far would you say compared to, say, Netherlands?
Oh my God! When I went to Geneva, I was 89, and I remember going to local gyms and meeting kids that were my age that had 100 fights. Mm-hmm. And I had 1, 2, maybe 3, and they weren't even legitimate. They were underground fights at the time. Mm-hmm. So I would say back then we were light years behind. I would say we still are now. When we send teams to international championships, our athletes will have 30, 40, 50 bouts, and we're competing with athletes that have had 200, 300. Mm-hmm. Those of you that follow boxing, will look at Lomachenko and say, wow, this person's had 300 bouts. That's about, the level of international competition in mm-hmm. kickboxing and even amateur boxing.
How do our Canadians do?
Terrible.
Really?
We've had, I think, a total of, and when I say terrible,
I know what you mean.
I don't mean to knock anybody down, but really, I mean, we've had, I think, 16 medals totally in 20 years mm-hmm. at the WAKO World Championships. So
what is it about their style that's different than ours?
It's interesting. I took a team to Bosnia a few months back for the last WAKO Worlds, and we had a debriefing with the team after. We had some very talented Canadians, and in the end, there was discussion about really not understanding the rules, not understanding the point system, how things are scored, what judges are looking for. And my response to the athletes and to the coaches and to myself too is, well, instead of always going back to we don't know why we're not winning, why don't we look at who's winning and what are they doing? Mm-hmm. And I would argue two things. I would argue that we still have a ways to go to learn how to actually win. And part of that is science. I mean, I love statistics. I've done my graduate studies in statistics, and it's a numbers game. And I'll give you a classic example. We looked at 100 fights internationally. We did the stats analysis on them. Out of those 100 fights, 82% of the athletes that won the first round won the fight. 76% of the athletes that just threw more techniques mm-hmm. per round won that round. I think it was 92% of athletes that scored the first point per round mm-hmm. won the bout. And that says something. Mm-hmm. I mean, it should say something to coaches around strategy, mm-hmm. And I think when I was training as a young athlete, we were always taught, feel out your opponent, see what he's got, and then start figuring out the You've got 3 rounds in an amateur bout, mm-hmm. And even 4 rounds or 3 rounds in professional bouts when you're starting off. There's not a lot of time to be feeling anybody out. Mm-hmm. You're behind the 8 ball. And there's this concept called acclimatizing judges, right? Mm-hmm. If judges see you first, in the old boxing days, they would say, win the first part of the round, win the last part of the round. Judges will see you, they'll notice you. There's a lot of psychology that indicates there's some truth to that. Mm-hmm. So I think our challenge has always been we don't have the statistical scientific knowledge of what it takes to win, not just physically, but psychologically. I will say one of the greatest things that's happened to the combative industry was actually MMA, especially in Canada. Because I think what MMA did was, because it's such an eclectic sport, it made our athletes train much more scientifically. Because you had to be good at stand up, you had to be good at the ground, you had to have good endurance, strength, core development. I mean, there was so much to be involved to be a well-rounded MMA athlete. So suddenly you saw MMA athletes doing these workout routines that boxers were still doing 10-mile runs a day. We're still doing very old traditional boxing, kickboxing training. Yet the MMA world was employing trainers and psychologists, fitness experts, even the issue of the weight cut. They were doing so many things that were far beyond our industry. And I think that helped a lot. I still think we have a long way to go. I think we've got some incredibly good coaches in Canada, super dedicated. But when I look at coaching in other sports, I'm involved with the Ministry of Sport, and I see what hockey coaches, tennis coaches. When I was doing my level 5 coaching certification, I was working with softball, and I would watch them watch thousands of pitches and get analysis down too. So if we're playing a game against Japan and they have these number of pitchers, this is a statistical chance of what kind of pitches they're going to throw. This is how we need to train our athletes to deal with that. And they use videos, they use computer analysis programs. I just sat there and all I kept thinking was, I still slap people in the head with a focus pad if they don't keep their hands up.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I mean, we're so far behind. Yeah. But I think we're catching up. I actually do. I think our organization, WAKO Canada, has done a remarkable job taking in some of our good coaches that are also very open-minded and saying, okay, so what do we have to learn about sports psychology? What do we have to learn about, training regimens? What do we have to learn about just what learning strategies will help athletes in high pressure situations and create models for that? We've had, oh my God, some incredible success stories, incredible people that have pushed the envelope. And when you look at what they've done, they're doing things outside the margins, and people say, oh, well, what's this guy doing? Why is he producing athletes in Glory or K1 or, the UFC? And then they want to go and take a look. We've got to systematize that.
You're dealing with Glory on some Canada stuff too. Can you talk about that at all?
A little bit. I mean,
because that's really cool too. Because I remember you told me that it was kind of under the hat, but you didn't want to say because you were talking, and I don't know if the COVID-19 thing is.
I think that's put a bit of a damper on it. I mean, we were working with Glory on changing legislation in Ontario to allow for the changes that the UFC was able to do through their lobbying efforts, to allow for changes within the traditional kickboxing rules that exist, to allow other types of kickboxing into Ontario in particular. So we met with Glory 2 or 3 times, both in Europe and here. A lot of work was done, but ultimately they as an organization had to start employing other law firms and lobbyists. And
it's a big task.
It was, and I think they're doing a good job. Things right before the lockdown, the government was ready to make some announcements on changes. So I think the legwork was done. And it wasn't just Glory. There was even us as amateur PSOs were lobbying the government for changes because we had, we could do Glory style rules now with WAKO in Ontario in particular. Yet our athletes can't turn professional under those same rules in the province. They have to go to Quebec or other provinces to do that. So I think we're on the verge of some great combative changes in Ontario. I think COVID, unfortunately, is slowing that down a bit. But I'm happy or hopeful in the next year or two, Ontario will explode.
Yeah, that's good. Now, you're a big part of the reopening process. Now, let's dive into that and kind of explain, because, the gyms are opening back up, thankfully, because, the biggest thing was, who I really felt for was the gyms. It's not everybody, not all gyms are big, massive gyms. And you as a gym owner, it's not easy sometimes to keep those doors open because your program's always got to be running. If you don't have that revenue, you don't have a gym, and it affects us all. And there are our friends, our colleagues, and our, so it's sad. I've seen online, you see gyms close, or like a karate place close, and you're like, wow, and you're like, that guy's blood, sweat, and tears just went down the drain over a virus, so these are troubling times, man. And now everything's reopening, but there's going to be some rules.
There are. And I know, unfortunately, there's some misunderstanding, I think, out there, and I will, I don't want to put the blame on anyone's shoulders, because I think everyone is doing the best they possibly can at a time where everybody's under a lot of stress. And I think the government's done a great job at the beginning of the whole pandemic, compared to other countries that, didn't respond as well. I think Canada and Ontario in particular did a really good job. I think that the phase now in terms of getting communication out, I never want to say it could have been done better or it could be done better. So I'll just say it could be done better. And bearing in mind that
they shit the bed, I'll say it.
I'll let you say that.
I think they shit the bed on it, and I only say that respectfully, in like, no one's ever dealt with a pandemic before.
And I think that's the big challenge, and I think the biggest fear is they look at countries like Singapore, even countries like Sweden that said we're going to follow the herd mentality, and it was a massive, colossal disaster for them, where people are going, okay, well, we don't want to make those mistakes. Even though the infection rates are small, even though the death rates are relatively small compared to other, infectious diseases or mortality, areas, it's an unknown area for us. And so I think I'm always very careful about making assumptions and laying blame, because I just know there's a lot of areas of difficulty here. What I do, though, is speak with people like Faisal and other physicians, people in government, to get a sense of where are they going, what are they looking at for data. I certainly don't use social media to inform myself. I use more, mainstream, whether it's BBC or CBC or.
That's why I had Faisal on.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was the whole point of it. There's just so much misinformation out there. You don't know what to believe.
Absolutely.
And it's saturated.
And I think he did a great job. And I think he also, recognized that there's a lot of unknown. And I think what I liked about Faisal's response was it wasn't about blaming anybody. But I think now the problem, that comes out of government a fair bit is they will make statements, but they could be unclear. So with the reopening, for example, gyms are not allowed to open. What's allowed to open right now, according to the ministry here, when they did the amendment of the Emergency Services Act, is member clubs of provincial sporting organizations, professional associations or professional leagues, or national sporting organizations. So long as those groups have a return to activity protocol put in place that allows for the sanitation, the social distancing, and probably the most important area, and that is contact tracing. And I know when I've heard from martial arts schools that are frustrated over this, they're saying, well, why do we have to be a member of X, Y, and Z group? And my explanation to them is, well, the PSOs should have been in contact with government the whole time.
Okay, I'm just gonna stop you. Let's just revisit PSO.
Okay.
Can you just explain PSO to people who have zero idea what a PSO is?
Okay.
Just so that everyone's kind of on the same page.
Absolutely.
Following through.
So it stands for Provincial Sporting Organization. Every government, every provincial and territorial government in Canada has what's called a sport recognition policy. So if your sport wants to do its thing in any jurisdiction, you have to apply to government, meet their requirements, and then you can play your sport. It's particularly stringent when it comes to combative sports. So if you come up with a sport where you and I are throwing ping pong balls at each other and we're carrying two rackets and we're going to call it, two-time ping pong, no one's going to, arrest you for doing that. There's no risk, exactly. But if I wanted a PSO for two-handed ping pong, there's an application process I could use. Now with combative sports, it's different. Whether it's no contact, light contact, full contact, they're all lumped under as combative sports. So because we have a legislation that forbids combative sports as not sanctioned by the province or a provincial arm's length organization, which is what our PSOs are right now for combative sports. So we as a group, we were the first PSO in Ontario. Now we have a PSO for Muay Thai. We've always had a PSO for boxing, for wrestling. It's going to be wonderful to have one for MMA, and I think that's on the amateur side, and I think that's something that's going to happen.
That's a whole nother podcast.
It is.
Because it's a big animal itself. MMA is a completely different animal.
It is, and I think that this government is much more open to the idea of doing it, and I think it'll actually go through. But you're right, that's another podcast. So the government said clubs that belong to PSOs will be given permission to open under certain requirements. Again, frustration for the industry, because when they hear a martial arts club can open and then suddenly they're like, okay, and they're contacting their public health, they're finding out what the guidelines are. And I think all clubs are doing their due diligence because they want to do the right thing. I don't think anybody in our industry wants to see people die, get infected, get sick, or get a fine, or get in trouble, or affect the credibility of their school or club. But the government was very clear. It was only clubs or members of PSOs. And again, two reasons. One, we've already been vetted when we applied. Every PSO has requirements every year. And because we have such strict regulations for medicals, safety, concussion protocols, coaching requirements, police checks, vulnerability sector searches.
I've done your coaching course through WAKO, and I was actually quite blown away by actually how in depth. It wasn't just about you're gonna get a punching. It's not about just that. There was actually so much more. Right. So and everybody that I took, we took, because we all did the course together. There was, I think, 40 of us, I think, at the time, and everyone went away. It was like, whoa, that was nothing like I'd ever expected, and it was really geared towards club owners. And when I say that, most people can be a coach. I think they have the ability to go in, but not everybody has the ability to run a club and run a successful club and not get their ass sued. Yep. That's the biggest thing out of the whole thing, is you don't want to be in the hot seat where you get your ass sued because, knock on wood, forbid, some kid breaks his neck, sparring, rolling, grappling, whatever it is. So at the end of the day, it was all about, getting rid of risk and protecting and covering your ass, that's why, again, is why I brought you on, because, I thought the course was really, really, really good, and I learned a ton from it. Everyone learned something from it and walked away in gym orders. But anyways, sorry, back to what you're saying.
No, and I'm glad you're saying that. And if I was to add something to what you just said, I'd say, some people are good coaches, not necessarily good gym owners, and some people are good businessmen and good gym owners, but maybe not necessarily good coaches. And so the PSO model was designed to have a minimum standard of education as well. And so the level 1 coaching course, we have a super excited level 2 coaching course that we've just are about to unveil, which I'd love to talk to you about later, because it really focuses on sports psychology and leadership. Like, how can we make our competitive athletes far more capable in their teams with coaches and trainers, so that they can have their peak performance versus kind of what we do now, which I think we have successes in pockets. But that whole structure exists within the PSO framework. And so if an athlete in Kenora gets a concussion at his school or in a competition, that goes right to our database. We flag it. We send an email to the physician, if it's a minor, to the parents on what the requirements are, how we'll track them. And so that back-end system allows for us to believe that we actually have a way of tracking the safety of the athlete. Then as a club owner, you would also get a contact and say, your athlete cannot come back to train. Not that your athlete can't compete.
And this is the same all across the board for PSOs, for Muay Thai, PSOs for karate, and so forth, and boxing. They all have their own protocols.
And
right?
football does.
But are they all the same?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And in fact, what's happening now, which is, again, I think a fantastic thing about living in this country, is when Rowan's Law was proclaimed, that's even going to be stricter now. And for people that are not familiar with Rowan's Law, it's the whole concussion protocol now. And we're going to be even more stringent on requirements for coaches, trainers, parents, athletes around how we manage concussions. And I know I've heard some people say they feel like we've swung way far to the right. And now if somebody, scratches their head too hard and gets dizzy, or saying it's a concussion and they have to stay home and not go to school. Yeah, I think maybe some people can argue that we've gone a little, far to the right when it comes to safety. But you know what? In my 40 years in this sport, I've seen careers ended. I've seen lives devastated. And I would rather be far to the right when it comes to injury prevention than far to the left and be very liberal about it. So that's what we as PSOs have to enforce with our clubs. And again, I'm not saying that clubs that are outside of the PSO model are not running good professional institutions. I have good friends of mine that run clubs that are not part of PSOs. I was bugging them to join, but they've got great professional clubs, and sometimes I consult with them to get some ideas on what they're doing well. And but the idea was the PSO was established to make sure that when we get into competition, that we don't get caught up in the competition itself, but we actually have safeguards put in place to protect everybody. So when the government came out and said only clubs that are members of PSOs can open their doors with restrictions, they were going by the understanding that PSOs have a system in place for contact tracing. We have a system in place where we as an organization have to create a return to activity protocol, get it vetted, send it to our membership and say, this is what you have to follow. That it just can't be any club saying, well, I'm going to have 6-foot markers in my gym and we're all going to wear visors. And like, that's the bare minimum, and we want to make sure we're doing more than the bare minimum.
Okay. So let's just say, let's use your club as an example. So clubs that are members of PSOs, you're going to open back up. What are you going to do with your club? How is the process? Let us know exactly what you're doing so that they can go, oh, okay, that's the process. This is what our requirements are for you.
Okay. So step number 1, we contacted our local public health.
Does everybody have to do that?
Yes. You have to contact your public health. You have to contact your bylaw officer.
Okay.
We had to email them a copy of our return to activity guidelines and ask them for feedback.
Where would somebody do that?
They would have to they could just do a Google search on bylaw office in London, Middlesex.
That's it. Okay.
Yes, get a number. Honestly, it's very hard to do now because most offices are closed. A lot of offices are working remotely and they've got cell phone usage. So there's been I've spoken to 15 or 18 bylaw offices across the province on behalf of clubs because they've had difficulty getting hold of people. We email them a document, we have a conversation, we ask them, is this sufficient for them? Is there any additional requirements? Because some municipalities are having additional requirements.
Because you said you got a little bit of pushback from some bylaw officers because they didn't really know.
We had a few. And again, this is what I'm going to go back to. When the government made the amendments, there was a lack of clarity, because originally when they said golf courses can open, gymnastics can open, it was a carte blanche comment. And so people were waiting for them to say fitness studios, karate schools. They didn't say that. So when they first made the announcements, it was a specific sport. Later on, it was no, only clubs within PSOs or professional leagues are allowed to open. So I think that was the first error on the part of government about not being very clear in the communication. So I think so then municipalities, bylaw officers are going, well, we didn't hear anything about a karate opening up or a martial arts school coming up. They have no idea what a PSO is. I mean, most people don't.
Unless you're engulfed in it. That's why I asked you to explain it, because most people don't know, and it's, and people that do know still don't really know.
I know. Some of us, and then some of us that are in it, when things change, we're like, what, did I get that email? So that's where we're at now, where the government has said, we would say, we contact the bylaw officer, we contact public health, we send them a copy of our return to play activity structure. We ask them if there's any additional things. In that process, yes, we're doing some education because some bylaw officers don't know. Other ones were like, we're waiting for you to contact us. And they want us to then give them a list of the clubs within their municipality that are members of the PSO. So there's been, I think yesterday I did 5 or 6 municipalities that email the members of our clubs and say, yeah, this is a member of our club. And then some of the bylaw officers would call me and say, is this club a member? I'm really careful. And usually whenever I get that message and I see that club is not a member, I'll call them up and I'll say, hey, I'm part of the same industry as you. You've opened your doors. You're not a member of the PSO. The bylaw officer has called me. I asked them to give me some time because I have to go back to my database. If you want to continue keeping your doors open, you have to follow the protocol, and whether I agree with it or disagree with it, that's the law right now. And you're part of my industry. I don't want to see you get fined. So if you would like to join.
Do you know what the fine is?
I've heard different ranges because I think I heard the $700 fine, but then I've heard of a skating rink getting fined $5,000. So I think the fines are actually municipally based. I may not be correct on this, but I've heard different fees now. And so there may be a standard provincial fee and there may be a municipal fee. There may be both.
Do you know if PSOs are lightening up on the fees for registration because of the times of not having any revenue?
Yeah,
over the past
there are some that are. I can tell you right now, we can't. And the fear I have is, and again, I'm going to be critical of my own industry. Every time we sign up members, it's like if I've got 1 million members, my liability as an organization goes up, which means the insurance brokers charges more.
Gotcha.
Now it gets less per person, but that whole structure needs to be done properly. We spent 2 months creating our return to activity protocols, through our legal advisors, our insurance broker, members of government. Like we wanted to make sure we were doing this right. So I anticipated that this was going to be the case. And so all we were able to do is to take, so if a club joined WAKO Canada now, we would allow that membership to last all of this year and all of 2021. So they're getting 2 for 1. That's the best we could do, which is good because then it works out to like $250 a year for 2 years. Like it's actually up, and and people have to understand that's for complete $2 million liability coverage for your gym. So in retrospect,
so ultimately, it's not like it's thousands of dollars to register your club.
It's hundreds of dollars.
Right?
It's hundreds of dollars.
But I mean, for the blanket of actually having the security of opening back up again, if that's what you got to do.
100%. And again, we're in a state now where fear is so rampant. We can't make decisions on fear. I've actually spoken to some PSOs and I've said, listen, I don't know if I agree with your policy. One PSO allowed a certain kind of training to happen at their gym, which we were advised not to do by a number of sources. And I said, I don't think you should be doing that. I'm just trying to be as careful as I can because honestly, Jamie, whether I think we've gone a little bit too aggressive with the way we've handled COVID and the impact it's had on our economy or not. My wife's cousin died of COVID. My accountant's husband passed away from COVID, all in the last 8 weeks. So it's actually hit home for me. I don't want to make my decisions based on fear though. I need to make my decision based on good, concrete information coming from credible sources, which is why I say to clubs, the best thing for you to do is contact your PSO if you don't have one because you train in Hapkido or you're eclectic martial arts or you're involved in MMA, contact WAKO Canada. We'll certainly give you all the information. And we're not here, we're not a business. We'll just say, if you want to join, we're not for profit. Here's the membership forms. Once they're done, we'll send you the return to play guidelines. If you have difficulty with your bylaw officer, come and contact us. Like I said, I've spoken to 15, 20 in the last 4 or 5 days on behalf of my clubs that are having difficulty. I see that as my volunteer job, that they're my membership, they're struggling. I know my club is struggling. So if I can, like I was on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, I was trying to get hold of bylaw officers in Greater Sudbury. We have 5 clubs up in Sudbury. And hours and hours and hours being on hold, trying to get a hold of the right person. And when we finally did, and the bylaw officer, it was actually the director or the acting manager, she had no idea of anything. I said, listen, I was about to say her name. Why don't I email you all the information? Can you just stay on the line with me? Let me email you the information. If you have any questions, let's just resolve this now because I may not be able to get a hold of you after. She was fantastic, sent her all the information. I said, listen, I get that you don't know. Let's just blame the province on this. We can both blame the province because neither of us work for the province. But if you have any questions, ask me now. Let's see if we can resolve this because we have 5 clubs in Sudbury. Some of them are struggling, and I really need them to open up under these guidelines. You know what? We're good. We're trying to do the same thing now in Brampton, the same thing in Oakville, the same thing in Mississauga, which have been regions that, because they're technically part of the GTA, they're not sure if they're subject to different rules. On Friday, the Premier made an announcement saying that we're all in phase 2 now. So that number is being up to 10, which is great. So going back to your original question, so that's your first 2 steps. Okay. Contact bylaw, contact public health, send out your confirmations, get a confirmation.
They give you the green light?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the bylaw officer has to give a green light.
Okay,
and
so now as a club owner, bang, the green light happens.
Yes.
And I say, Monday we're opening up.
100% no. What you need to do, we knew about this about almost a week and a half, 2 weeks ago that we could open.
Okay.
We've spent the last 2 weeks training our staff, purchasing enough sanitation equipment, which it's been a small fortune for us.
Okay, so what's the requirements now?
Okay, so you have to have so I'll start from the beginning till the end. Mm-hmm. So somebody walks into your gym, they're a member. You have to have a clear screening protocol put in place. So there's got to be signs in your gym around it's like what we do right now. You go into a grocery store, there's a big sign there saying, have you been traveling? Have you had symptoms, et cetera, et cetera. So we have our version of that. Mm-hmm. They have to be able to see it. They have to be screened at the front. They have to complete an acceptance of risk waiver, which is something that our association provided. Mm-hmm. Because right now we do know that all the insurance companies are removing all COVID-related claims. So we had to go through our lawyers and our broker to find out if we have no coverage for any claim that happens from COVID, what are our options? And this is the best option for us. So we have a waiver. They fill in the waiver. They literally walk through a pathway through our gym. They deposit their shoes on the outside. So we have one entrance. They go to the other entrance where they'll exit. Mm-hmm. They'll put off the shoes there. They'll go into a 4-meter marked square. That's how we'll be running classes. Maximum of 10. We run our class. And for the most part, people they want to see people again. Mm-hmm. They want to communicate. They want to talk.
I took my wife and daughter to Baskin Robbins for ice cream yesterday, and I told the staff, I said, you know how great this is?
Yeah.
I know I'm still 6 feet from you, but this is just great just to be in here.
Exactly.
Trying to get that normal life back. Yeah. Okay, so everyone's surrounded by 4-meter squares.
Yep, they got 4-meter squares marked off on the floor. We run a 45-minute class because we're now restructuring our entire schedule at my school. Once the 45-minute class is over, now people are now lining up outside of our gym for the next class. As they exit, we sanitize the entire gym. So we've purchased, again, at a huge cost, sanitizing equipment. All the floors are mopped. All the surface areas are sprayed. All the handles are sprayed. So in that process, our change rooms are not open. We will allow the use of one bathroom that has to be cleaned after every time someone uses it. And so that process goes on. We've mopped it down to about 10 minutes, and then people exit from the back of the building where we've got chairs set up for parents if they want to watch. And then the next group comes in. So the screening at the beginning, the social distancing while they train, and the exiting, that's the crux of our policy. Now there's really specifics in there around the questions that they get asked. It goes into a database. We're keeping track of it. If a member from our school contract COVID or is with somebody that has contracted COVID, we have a system to disseminate that information out to everybody right away. We send it to the ministry. We send it to our local public health and the bylaw officer. So that context tracing becomes critical for us because without that piece, we weren't allowed to open. And it's got to be connected throughout.
Well, let's just hope, that someone's not going to come to the gym and, say, yeah, I had a fever the other day.
But the dilemma for us is, many people are asymptomatic, and so suddenly if somebody was in contact with somebody who was completely asymptomatic and then they became symptomatic and they're like, oh my God, my dad had COVID and we didn't know. So we've got to have a system within the screening and the questionnaire where people understand that it could be symptomatic, it could not be symptomatic, but if it becomes your responsibility to inform us right away. And that's part of the whole process.
Okay, so what about partner work? Sparring, pad holding?
So this is the great part of, again, being a part of a PSO. So we've created phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 for our industry. Phase 1, no equipment use. Phase 2, you're allowed to use bags. So in phase 1, we can't use bags. Phase 3, you're allowed to do partner work, but they have to wear face shields or masks while they're doing partner work, and they're allowed to do pads. After phase 3 is over, that's when you're talking about sparring or all of that. So, and I mean, I can go through. There's other things in phase 2 that we're allowed to do that we can't do in phase 1. But the idea of sparring, that's after phase 3. So no contact with bags only, partner work with pad use and tie pad use. And then after phase 3, then we could talk about sparring.
How long do you think this is going to go on for? What is your honest opinion? I mean, you're working with the government on some of this stuff. Like, what's the general census? Do you think this is going to be, a 2-year thing, 6 months, 3 weeks? Like, that's painful for a lot of fighters to be like going, man, like I can't spar, I can't do this, I can't do all that. Like, how do guys train for fights? I mean, we have the problem with no venues anyway. So, I mean, it's not like, everything's open up and you can go catch a fight. But
yeah. And I think it's painful for fighters. It's painful for non-fighters. I've had so at my school and within WAKO Canada, we've been running youth forums. We've had hundreds of kids on our youth forums. We run a lot of collective town halls with our clubs. Mental health issues, depression issues. I mean, there's a lot of, what are they going to say are the other outcomes of COVID, So we may not lose that many lives from the disease, but we may end up losing a lot of lives from residual impacts, whether it's economics or mental health. So that's a huge issue for us, and I think we'll start seeing the impact of that in the next year to 2 years to 5 years. I personally believe, and again, I don't claim to be an expert in this whatsoever. I was on one of the Premier's 14 task force, which was fantastic for me because I represented all sports on the task force. But it gave me a chance to work with some infectious disease doctors, folks that are actually on the front lines, but they're also advising us on the economics and the health issues around COVID and how our collective industry should deal with it. And the sense that I get is COVID is not going away anytime soon. We're going to be dealing with this for possibly a few years. The issue of vaccines, again, from what I'm being told, is again, we're a few years off because when you add in everything from clinical trials to testing to
3 years, I heard.
Yeah, there's I've heard
Minimum.
3, I've heard 2, I've heard so I've heard 5. I've heard we may never get a cure for COVID. We may just have to accept that it's going to be like smallpox. It's just some people die from it. And I think at some point, governments will make decisions as to we just have to move on with our economy now and do our best guess, not our best guess, our best efforts to protect the most vulnerable, to make sure our healthcare system is prepared if there ever are spikes, or what they're calling the second wave or the third wave or the fourth wave. But we'll have to eventually get back to normal. And it will be a new normal. Jamie, I'm an eternal optimist. My wife often laughs at me over this, but I really believe that, we've learned some valuable lessons about time with family. We've learned some valuable lessons about resilience, being creative. I applaud my industry. I've watched the fitness industry virtually shut down, but I've seen the martial arts industry open up classes on Zoom, Facebook Live, doing as much as they can to engage their members. I've watched some of our clubs with Zoom classes of 100, 150 members on it. Again, WAKO Canada, our clubs are our life. And watching club owners, I've had so many leaders within our industry, within our organization, come out and help with town halls, help with creating waivers, help by doing research, help by talking to other jurisdictions like the US or Europe, Australia, try and bring back information on, okay, so if we're going to create this template, maybe we should look at what's happening in Australia. In fact, in our return to play guidelines, one of our club owners, fantastic guy, I'm going to mention right now, Joey Del Reyes from Combat Arts, has done a wonderful job, advising me on a regular basis on, okay, well, this is what your policy says right now, but this is what we're learning about HVAC systems and possibly droplets being more susceptible for people contracting COVID. So maybe we need to relook at that issue. And we went back to some building inspectors to get some more data and feedback. So within our PSO, we've had great leadership moving forward. And I'm an optimist because I've seen people do optimistic things. I say this to my own children. I mean, unfortunately, in life, we're going to get calamities. And if we have the capacity to believe the calamity will one day end, then we'll move on. In my tradition, we have a phrase in Arabic that says, with hardship comes ease. it's mispronounced or mistranslated. It doesn't say after hardship comes ease. It says with hardship comes ease, which means that as you're struggling through something, it's like training for a fight. You're training for a fight. You're tired. You're hungry. You're exhausted. You're sore, but you're happy as you're doing it because you're seeing your body change. You're seeing your thought process change. You're seeing your ability to, make decisions not reactively, but responding well. It becomes an entire process of watching yourself evolve into a better version of yourself. I believe that one of the outcomes of COVID, if we choose that outcome, could be that we could become better versions of ourselves. Because you don't become a better fighter until you face someone that's better than you. That actually forces you out of your comfort zone.
Got to be the nail.
And now there'll be some clubs that will tragically close. And my heart goes out for them because I know people are, this is their livelihood. And my gym, I've lost, a significant amount of my revenue where we've been dipping into our savings for the last 2 months. It's been very difficult. It's made me relook at the way I do my own personal budgeting. Maybe I don't need those extra special bags anymore, or maybe I need to redo some things. It's taught me valuable lessons. I think for the clubs out there now, and I'm going to say this to the entire sector, if you are an MMA school or a martial arts school and you're not part of a PSO, if your PSO is not giving you support, maybe this is a time, maybe COVID was there to give you a chance to join something that will help your school out. Because I don't believe people should join our organization now just for the sake of opening their school. I think they should join it because they're going to be part of an association that's there to be an advocate for that group and to provide them with resources, training, and professional development to allow them to become better at what they do, whether it's training athletes, training people to become better versions of themselves, or getting people fit and positive.
Strong immune systems.
100%.
Get back to the grind.
100%.
Yeah, that's.
But going back to your original question, when do I think this will be over? We're always looking for milestones. I mean, people really thought that July 1st, there's going to be significant change. I believe so too. Part of it is that, I work with economists, and we know that the tourism sector, if we don't get it up and running, it could cripple our economy, especially in certain regions. So when you look at cottage country, when you look at the areas, Niagara Falls, Toronto, they need that summertime to open fast. So I think we'll start seeing some more openings come July, some more lessenings of restrictions. I think come September, when you start to look at another milestone, which is kids going back to school, they're gonna have to start relooking at some broader issues now. When you start looking at some economies not doing very well or some sectors not doing well, whether it's government stimulus or taking a look at the pros and cons now for open some sectors. Like I know governments are having those conversations, and there's going to have to be some decisions made at all levels, globally, nationally, provincially, and municipally. I think we as club owners have to be on top of that. Like we have to be educated and aware, know what's happening, to help us make those decisions. But yeah, this situation, I believe, is going to continue for a long time. But I think the strong will survive.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just so bizarre that we're even having to have this conversation. Do you know what I mean? Like 6 months ago, I never would have thought, that we would be doing this. We would have to be, my daughter's home from school or homeschooling and, staying away from each other. We just had an event in March. Yeah. It was literally the week later, everything shut down.
And the reason I couldn't go to your event, which I really wanted to, was we had the Ontario Winter Games the same weekend. And so my athlete, the athletes over there, I mean, we couldn't do it because that was happening. And then right after the Winter Games was over, when we had 100 kids from across the province with 3,500 athletes, a week later, our world shut down.
Yeah.
And so, if I was to make one more comment, and I think it's important to Jamie, to us as individuals, whatever happens now, whatever decisions are being made that are going to be made in the next while, I mean, I think we as humans have to always know that kindness and forgiveness is such an important part of us bouncing back. And again, that's why I'm always careful about laying blame, although it's easy sometimes to lay blame on government. I don't blame a club if they are desperate and they open their doors. I don't blame somebody for not joining our PSO or for joining another PSO or just being frustrated. I don't blame a club that is even a member of a PSO but have chosen not to open right now because of fear. I don't blame people for wearing masks, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. I don't blame, I think we should learn that valuable lesson that, this is also a sign for humanity that, we're not as good as we thought we were.
I feel like this is a judgment time. And then not even to say that in like a biblical sense, I'm saying just like everywhere you look is judgment time. It's it's a real test of our human nature. People are agitated, people are scared, people are fighting back. There's so much turmoil. So and I just hope that, everyone can pull it together. And like you said, if you're kind and think about your neighbor, take care of the guy beside you, take care of your friends, take care of your family. Assume the people that you're running into, on the street every day that are agitated and in a bad mood, they have families too. Do you know what I mean? Like you got to think outside your circle, and then that's a hard thing to do when people are scared, man.
It 100% is. And even now when you saw, what happened globally with the incident in the US and many people, still in shock that this could happen, in 2020 and being reminded by many people that this has been happening for a long time, and it has not gone away. And just seeing how, I saw some great responses. I saw ones that made me very sad. Again, especially as someone who grew up with racism and my involvement in the entire industry grew out of that experience. Knowing that some people are actually saying, oh my God, like, tell me more. I had no idea. Which I think is wonderful because I think people are opening their hearts a bit more. I've seen some people not do that, and I think, the fact that we're in COVID now, is another sign that, we could be learning something from COVID and then not applying it in another part of our lives. Like on a personal level, during the lockdown was our month of Ramadan, which as a practicing Muslim, we fast for a month. And one of the coaches from my gym is one of Canada's most amazing athletes, Brandon Lehman, said, Mads, you know what, I'm going to try it. I really want to see if I could do it. Fast, from morning to night. And so he wanted some more information about it and how it's done. And I reminded him, I said, Brandon, listen, fasting is not about not eating and drinking. In fact, we have a belief that some people will get nothing but hunger and thirst out of Ramadan. And that's not the purpose. The purpose is to be put in a state of hardship and be kind. Be put in a state of difficulty and be patient. Be put in a state of challenge and realize that some people live like that every day.
Don't be hangry.
Yeah, exactly. And trust me, as a former fighter, I know what that feeling feels like. And that is the value of Ramadan for us, that we fast to become better versions of ourselves. I love eating. And I've got my vices when it comes to cheesecake and things like that. COVID, I'm trying to reinterpret it. I'm trying to actually, and it's for my own sanity, right? Otherwise, I would go berserk going, oh my God, is this a conspiracy? And it came from China. And I mean, I'll do the same thing everybody else does on social media. I'd rather say, you know what, this is horrible. This is a horrible situation. Lives are being lost. Businesses are being lost. How can I become a better person from it? What have I learned about myself? What do I need to do better? We had a town hall with our member clubs, and I was saying, guys, you know what? Let's show our leadership. Let's not make, Instagram posts about, conspiracy theories in China. Let's not, condemn the government. Let's be leaders. Let's actually show that martial arts is about teaching character, discipline, respect, not just at our clubs and our schools, but outside of it. And that's what, with my 3 children, that's what I'm always trying to do, saying, you know what, this happened and it's horrible, but you know what, there'll be other horrible things that will happen to you in life. You'll go through heartaches and you'll go through other challenges and lost jobs and divorces. And, those are just moments. We have a choice on the meaning we can give any experience that we face. If we just live for that experience, then we learned nothing. But we have one choice. And I think the one thing about being, part of humanity now, which we always need to be reminded of, is we have the choice of the meaning we want to give something. So COVID happened. I think it was fantastic. I think because it's allowed me to spend more time at home. It's allowed me to finally do my garden, which looks much better. It's allowed me to work on a sports psychology course that I've been trying to finish over the last 5 years. I have to give it that meaning. Now, not to say that I'm not downplaying the impacts it's had on other people, but I need to give it that meaning to make me a better version of myself.
Yeah, 100%.
And we all have to do that.
I said the same thing to Dara. I said, you have to get something out of this. You have to come out of COVID leveled up.
Yep.
Somehow. In whether it's fitness, whether it's your mental, whether it's you read the book you didn't get a chance to read.
Absolutely.
Whether it was you made those phone calls you couldn't make because you were so... I had so much free time.
Yeah, I know.
Since there was no fights. Like there was...
Yeah.
And literally, I went from being on my phone 24 hours a day and he can attest for it. We do a podcast week of the show. Yeah. And I turned the phone over and I had, what was it? 120? Yeah, 120 missed text messages. And I was like, geez, how am I going to keep up with that?
Yeah.
To crickets.
Yeah.
It's quiet. Same thing. Worked on the garden, doing home reno stuff. New podcast studio today, and you're the first guest.
It's fantastic.
New business relations. Level up. Do something, level up. Be better than you were yesterday, regardless of what's in front of you. And it's how you take it. Some people crumble, man, and maybe they're not meant for it. But this is our responsibility to say, you're not meant for it, but I can help you.
Yeah.
Or what do you need? Do you need that extra advice? Do you need a friend? You need someone to talk to? Or even just positivity. Turn the phones off, man.
Absolutely.
100%. And it's counterproductive because we got a podcast, we're putting them on social media, but really, put the phone away. Take some time, like have conversations, discussions.
Yeah.
You're not going to get anywhere if you don't discuss these things. And it's
absolutely,
you're 100% right, man. Like,
yeah. And we're seeing that. It's interesting. I'm watching, we're watching some of our political leadership, maybe not doing a great job, but then I'm seeing other leaders pop up from all avenues. I mean, honestly, my inspiration comes from my clubs. I mean, I'm watching these guys. Rich Cruz runs a club out in Markham. His Zoom classes are just spectacular. Veronica DeSantos runs a member club in Toronto. Watching her kids do regular messaging on, positivity, on positive mental health is just remarkable. I've watched clubs within our industry, within our organization, show great leadership. And I'm encouraging all clubs to do that. Saying, you know what, people will want to come back to martial arts. I know there's a Gallup poll that I heard the other day from Minister McLeod's town hall, and it was a little stark, where I think the stat was only 12% of Canadians will feel comfortable going back to hotels in the next year.
Wow.
Only 9% of Canadians will feel comfortable going to museums, art galleries in the next year. Only 8% of parents are going to feel comfortable putting their kids in organized sports. Those are pretty harsh stats, But you know what though? My club is going to have those 8%. I'm going to have 8% of all the people in Burlington are going to come to Bay Area Athletic Club because I'm going to have the best, positive, most effective club to deal with self-esteem, anti-bullying, mental health, physical training, relationship building, because I've realized from this time that I can level up my game, my club. I'm going to make WAKO Canada the best organization. It's interesting. I've had, a couple of clubs say to me, wow, you guys have done a lot. I mean, we haven't seen the same level of activity other PSOs. And I'm not here to criticize any other sport or any other organization. But what COVID did for WAKO Canada was make us look at our membership and say, you're our clients. What do you need? Do you need town halls? Do you need lobbying efforts? Do you need contacting your local bylaw officers? What do you need? Tell us, because we need to do the best we can for you. And your comment about leveling up, absolutely. So I'm gonna that 8% of people that are gonna go back to organized sports and activity, I'm gonna make sure that 100% of that 8 will be at my school. And I think that's what we all have to do.
Beautiful. So how does somebody get a hold of you? Let's say somebody who's outside of the realm, they don't know what a PSO is, we got a gym, let's just say, how do they do it?
The easiest way is go on Facebook. WAKO Canada is our name, WAKO Canada. You can just go and send us a message on WAKO Canada. We're also on Instagram. You can contact WAKO Canada on Instagram. And I'm on that almost 24/7.
Beautiful. We can post a link and stuff like that too when we do this. But Maz, thank you for coming in. I truly like this. It means a lot. I hope that we got some clarity.
I hope so too.
And to kind of give the gyms an understanding. And if you don't know, please reach out. Reach out to myself or Maz. We can direct you the right way. We'll post the links and try to get everybody to make sure that they're back up and running and doing what you love to do.
Jamie, thank you very much for having me. Thanks for putting Faisal on an earlier podcast. I think that was fantastic.
He touched my brain.
Yeah, and you know what? And
he touched my brain with a swab. I did the.
I just had to leave at that point when it was coming out. I'm going, oh my god! So I missed that part. Oh, yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and watch that again.
He touched my brain. It was cool. Made me smarter.
Thank you so much for doing this for everybody.
Yeah.
Like I think your role, both with your promotion and with this method of education, is so important for industry. And I think you're doing something that you're going beyond just fights. I mean, you're actually talking to people about people. What we can do as a collective industry to show all Canadians that, hockey may be our number one sport, but martial arts is pretty close.
Oh, sure it is. Yeah. I believe that. Martial arts is my whole world.
Absolutely.
It's everything. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. That's our guest for today. And tune in next time. We'll have this up probably every Tuesday at 7 p.m.
Oh, fantastic.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.